It's time for Ask Mike Mondays. Mike answers one listener's question every week. Here's Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to Ask Mike Mondays. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining me today, the mayor, the governor, the president of Beckerville Corporation, Mr. Michael Becker.
Hey, Paul.
Mr. Michael Becker and his group over at SPI own so much real estate, they should be picking him up in a Mercedes limousine every day because the amount of property taxes that he includes into the economy of Texas.
Helping the social services of many municipalities out there, that's for sure.
Is that not crazy? I mean, you guys pay millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, tens of millions. Yeah, it's crazy. It makes me sad every time I think about it.
And in Texas, I mean, those property taxes, I mean, they continue to go up because they're not capped.
Well, they just passed tax reform, so we'll see kind of how that does. Supposedly it can't go over 3.5%.
3.5%. So they're trying to. We'll see how that goes and see how effective that is because it can't go up on value, but maybe you can go up on
the rate. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see kind of how that goes. Hopefully they'll stem the tide and maybe put a whole bunch of property tax protest consultants out of business too in the meantime. Who knows how that goes? Because
it's always a fun game at the time you have to figure out what your property taxes are for this year. Yep. So not good. But as you know, Mr. Michael Becker and his group over at SPI, they manage over $670 million in apartments in the great state of Texas.
Something like that, yeah.
Over how many?
We have about 5,300 today in climbing, so we're out there being active.
But you bought over 7,500 doors?
That's right, yeah. Sold a few and keep going.
Unbelievable. And you've kind of changed from what Class C properties up to, would you say, A-, B+?
Yeah, we've been pretty intentional about trying to sell some older stuff and trade up into better quality stuff as the market's allowed us to do that. We're pretty much out of the C-class business. We still have quite a bit of B left that we're slowly kind of trading out of and then going to kind of that late 90s to early 2000 vintage is really kind of my most favorite part of the market today.
Why is that? I mean, why is Class A, B? Why move from C up to B?
I think if you go back 6-7 years ago when we bought our first deal, you could buy a brand new Class A deal in Dallas-Fort Worth for about a 5 cap. A B deal was like a 6.5 cap, and a C deal was somewhere between 8 and 8.5 cap. And you fast forward today, you buy a brand new Class A deal for like 4.75. A B deal is like a 5, and a C deal is like 5.25 to 5.5. So what used to be a much larger spread between property grade from the top to the bottom of the property grade, as the base of the cap rates are all on top of each other right now. So for me, it doesn't make as much sense to buy the same basic cap rate 1974 piece of crap building than I can a 2004 building. So it just doesn't make as much sense. What is harder for people is the price of poker is more because the sales prices are $25, $30, $40 million for these A- deals where it might be $15, $20 million for a C-class deal. So there's a lot of people out there who can write a $3 to $5 million kind of check. But once you I found, Paul, once the purchase price kind of breaks over $20 million, you start thinning out the herd. So the most competitive part of the marketplace, and my observations, that $10 to $20 million range is pretty damn competitive right now.
What is Michael Becker's rule number 1?
Yeah, don't buy in the hood. Yeah.
In fact, we have Michael Becker's rule number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and we'll talk about that at some future podcast. I think we've handled that in the past, but Michael Becker's rule number 1 is absolutely true. Do not buy in the hood where you think everything is the same. It is not. Location makes a big difference, especially these older properties too that were built back in the 60s or the 70s or even the 50s. They just keep getting older every year, and the technology keeps getting older every year. So just be careful with that. Let's kind of talk a little bit about our series that we're on number 4. Series on number 4. We start off at number 1 about being educated. And this comes from a question from a lady that writes in, "You have motivated me to buy apartments. Love the podcast. What are the steps?" And we talked a little bit about being educated, number 1. Number 2, find a broker. That's the listing agent to kind of figure out what's available out there that you can buy. Number 3, get the capital. Show me the money. Where's the money coming from? How do you get funded into these transactions? Not only, finding the loan is one piece, but finding the equity. Equity is probably the most critical piece that you have to put into the transaction. So this is not a no money, no credit business. You need to have money on your own. So you got to have the capacity to make payments, but you need the equity into the transaction itself. Number 4, working the deal. And when I come from saying working the deal, it really means is that you found a property with a broker. They've accepted your LOI, your letter of intent to purchase. So Mike, let's talk about working the deal. Talk a little bit to me about that part of the transaction?
Yeah, so we'll kind of exclude the equity part since we just talked about it on last podcast. But make sure you have that all lined up, and then one of the first calls you should do as you're in the LOI process is call your friendly mortgage broker. And so you call Paul, just call Paul, right, like that TV series, and better call Paul, right? Anyways, make sure you have your debt lined up, because your debt's obviously a very key component. Usually it's 2/3 to 3/4 of the capital out there in today's environment. So make sure that you get the debt lined up. So the working the loan is obviously probably the most time consuming part of it. So make sure you're getting all the diligence organized, and you're submitting all the proper applications and supporting documentation you need from the seller, from the financial statements and rent rolls and your operating budget from your management company. That's all critical. You need to make sure as you're in escrow that you work with a good commercial insurance broker as well, and making sure you get loss runs from your seller, so you kind of know what losses were on the property for the last, say, 5 years. Provide that to them. Make sure you firm up the quote so you have the proper coverage that your lender is going to require. So the lender will give you insurance requirements, send that to your insurance broker. They bid it out with the loss runs, and you get a quote, and then that has to also go to Paul, and Paul can then incorporate that with the sizing of the loan as well. So make sure you think through that when you guys, kind of get the LOI as you're signing the PSA, purchase sale agreement. You typically have a diligence period on the first, 30 days, whether you have non-refundable money or not. There's usually a diligence period. That's when you can go do all your physical inspections. So, hire someone like Brian Amos to go out there, who we've had on the podcast a few times, an engineer to make sure you walk units and the major components of the building to make sure you know what you're walking into and you have enough capital set aside to carry your deferred maintenance, as well as implement your value add strategy if you're doing that on the property. So make sure you do that, as well as you make sure you do your financial diligence, try to get copies of bank statements, try to verify deposits to the income that they show on their income statement, their T12, as well as you want to do a lease file audit to kind of match the actual records of the leases to what's on the rent roll that you offered when you made an offer to buy the property. So you do that, audit all the service contracts, make sure you understand what's assumable, what's not assumable. So if you must assume this contract, then you have to. If not, then you'll kind of bid out like, hey, the trash, can I get a better trash bid? Can I pay $2,000 a month instead of their $2,500 a month? And same thing with pest and landscaping and various contracts like that. And then your management company will help you do there. The management company is also, while you're in the middle of escrow, they're interviewing the current staff most likely, and either trying to extend offers to them or making sure they're lining up all the staffing on the property and getting all the vendors set up and getting set up in your management software, Yardi, RealPage, whatever it is. So all those things are kind of all going on simultaneous of you raising capital and processing your loan. And then if you do everything right, you're able to close on time and take over the property. And hopefully it's a nice, smooth transition if you do all that kind of legwork in the meantime.
How many times have you done that?
A lot, right? So as a banker, a lot. Then as a principal for ourselves, 36 times. And then with some other advisor, we've probably done 50 transactions on the acquisition side in the last 6 years.
So you guys have a due diligence checklist. Is that something that you can give to folks?
We haven't promoted that in a while, but that's if you want that, you just go to the oldcapitalpodcast.com website. There's a copy of our due diligence checklist. So when we're putting an LOI out, we always attach a copy of our SREO, Schedule of Real Estate Owned, showing all the properties that we own, as well as a copy of the diligence material that we're going to request. And that's kind of like Christmas, right? You write your wish list out, and you don't always get everything you want, but we start with that, so feel free to go there, download it, and plagiarize it as your own. And then when you actually negotiate in the contract, the PSA, there's a list of diligence items that the seller has to provide, and that's usually what we try to start with. And then some stuff is not applicable, and then some stuff that you simply just got to give on. So there's certain critical stuff that you need, and then some of the stuff that you can live without, but you certainly download that. That's a good starting point for the diligence that you should get from, a group that's done, 50 acquisitions either for themselves or for some of their clients.
So you guys hire attorneys. You'll hire attorney for the PPM, the private placement memorandum, if you're raising money through a security piece. Then you also have a contracts attorney. So it's two separate attorneys.
They are.
If somebody did not have a relationship with a contracts attorney, what's kind of the best way of somebody to try to find to make sure that it's a contracts attorney and it's not a estate planning attorney? Yeah,
you just ask for a referral, right? So either the broker can help you out, or, Paul and Old Capital, I'm sure, can make a couple introductions to you and just interview a few different ones, make sure you feel comfortable with them. But yeah, that's usually what I would say. Just find, the vendors are there.
Yeah, how critical is a contracts attorney when you're dealing with these transactions?
Details matter. So I guess they don't matter until you have a conflict, and then all of a sudden they matter a lot, right? So, knowing the reps and warranties, knowing the default language, knowing the casualty clause, I mean, all these things are critical when there's problems. So.
Yeah, you don't need contracts when there's no problem. It's only when there's a problem do you need contracts and ways to remedy the situation, make sure it still goes forward or it falls apart, and that if you put hard money up in these deals, that hard money can be released back to you. Because you've had some situations where you've had fires in the middle of escrow during the middle of this putting the deal together, and you've had to kind of figure out, are we going to go forward? Are we going to go backwards? What's going on? So you needed to have some language in there, right?
That's right. Yeah. So the details matter. So find an experienced real estate lawyer that does contracts, right? So someone that specifically focuses on real estate, that's knowledgeable in the state that you're buying the property. So I think it's important. A lot of the stuff's kind of, you go across state lines, but I think it's really important that if you're buying a property in California, you need a lawyer that understands California law because it changes by state. So I think that's pretty critical. I mean, they also help with the lender diligence as well, usually. So the lender's going to require opinion letters and certain, reps and things that your lawyer is going to provide the lawyer for the bank. And so making sure they have, experience doing that as well and kind of know what they're doing. So that's a very critical vendor of yours, your management company, your mortgage broker, your insurance agent, and your lawyer. Those are kind of your four main vendors.
So working the deal for section number 4. So we started off in education. We talked about how to find a broker and listing agent. We talked about how raising capital. And then today we talked a little bit about working the deal from the point of the LOI. Next week, we'll talk a little bit about closing the transaction and what to expect post-closing. So, Michael, tell us a little bit more about what SPI does. Can you?
Yeah. So if people want to find more information about us, the easiest way is simply go into our company's website, which is www.spiadvisory.com. That's SPI like spy, advisory.com. There's a contact us form. Fill that out. And I'm always happy to have a 10 or 15-minute telephone call with listeners I meet at the podcast. And really what we do is we focus on finding high-quality opportunities and putting them together and going out and raising money from our investor database. So I'm always happy to have a call with anyone that's interested in maybe getting on our list and finding out more information about what we do. Or if, the other thing that we've been pretty successful with, Paul, is we've helped several people that have had, some larger checks and just kind of doing joint ventures. So, kind of $5+ million in equity, typical story. A lot of people with some 1031s coming from California or New York, trying to break into the Texas markets and be able to kind of leverage our relationships and experience and get some of these deals done.
Absolutely. Some great information from Michael Becker. I'm Paul Peebles. Have a great day.